Who enforces the law? The executive, right? Who's arresting all our people and who's doing that? Is it the legislators? Who's doing it? The executive. So do you think that the executive branch is enforcing the law the way it should be enforced? Are they enforcing the law equally as it should be enforced equally? Equal justice in front of the law. Are they doing that? So justice in America, for the most part, is not always fair. It's not implemented and enforced equally. For the most part, these laws are drafted in a way to help who? Traditionally.
Status quo.
Well, one, to keep the status quo, which keep things the same, but other than that, who are they really designed? When Trump, for example, pushed for these tax cuts earlier this year, was it to help the poor people? Who was it to help? The rich people, the corporations, the 1%, the people with power. So for the most part, the people that are drafting these laws are legislators, right? These legislators are supposed to represent the people. But in reality, in order to become legislators, how do they get there? How are they getting to where they are? How are they becoming senators?
Money from...
First, I mean, you know, the law says whoever gets the most votes is going to go and serve and become a legislator, right?
Yeah.
But in order to get the most votes, you need what? Money. You need campaign finance, you need money. So who's donating to these campaigns? Is it the poor people? No, they don't have any money. It's the rich people, and they're pouring in millions, if not billions of dollars. And just to give you some examples of that, because you have to understand, before you lobby these people, you have to know who you're going to go talk to, what issues, what's important to them, what are the things that they stand for, what are the things that they're scared of, what do they want, right? How did they get there? So that way you know how to approach them. Now if you go there and start talking about Palestine and the issues that you care about and Islam and Sharia, and well, they don't care about that stuff. That has nothing to do with them. Now of course if they're a person of color, for example, African American, they may sympathize a little bit because they may have seen or witnessed some of this stuff, but for the most part, that's not necessarily an issue that's related to them. So, for example, does anybody know how much was spent? Remember President Obama? Of course, we remember him. Yeah, well, it's hard to... We wish we had Obama nowadays, you know, despite his problems compared to what we have now. Some of us are shaking our head, it doesn't matter. And for some of us, it's true. It didn't matter under Obama, it doesn't matter under Trump, it doesn't matter who's there, we're still being treated unjustly. It's the same treatment. Now that may not necessarily be the same for all Americans, but specifically for the people in this room, is for the most part things are not changing. The policies are kind of remaining the same. But just to tell you, you know, President Obama, the first black American to become president, it wasn't cheap, you know, for him to run. Can anybody guess in 2012 when he ran against who? Who did he defeat?
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney. Most people forgot Mitt Romney because people don't remember the losers, you know, they remember the winners. You ask, like, who did, you know, who did George Bush defeat in his, you know, when he ran the second time? Who did he beat?
John Kerry.
Okay, well, encyclopedia, don't answer anymore. Okay, stay in Albany, please. I don't know what's going on there. Wikipedia. Well, let's give other people a chance. He's the kind of guy that always sits in the front and answers all the questions. So yes, it was Mitt Romney, John Kerry, and most people also forgot John Kerry ran. But if I show you the slide, can anybody guess, like, when Barack Obama ran in 2012, how much money he raised in order to win?
$2 billion. It was in the hundreds of millions.
Okay, you don't answer any more questions, okay? You reached your quota for questions. Hundreds of millions? I mean, okay, well, hundreds could be a lot, like, just, you know. Any other guess? 2 million, you said? What?
I'm sticking with this.
Okay, so here's a number. It's not very clear up there, but he spent a total of $1.4 billion. $1.4 billion. Now, Mitt Romney actually spent more than him, or raised more than him, Team Red, collectively, it was $1.2 billion, $1.25 billion. That's huge. That's some, yeah, turn it back up. So, and that's not only, when Hillary ran, she also spent about a total of, I guess, 800 million. Trump, who spent a lot less than her, a total of 400 million, he actually beat her by spending half the money. But also when you think of Senate, the most expensive Senate race right now, in 2016 I mean, was a Pennsylvania Senate race, $135 million of outside spending, a total of $188 million in order to become a senator. In one race, $188 million. So that costs a lot of money. So where did they get this $188 million? They got it from the big, billionaires. People like Adelson and others. They're not getting it from Arabs and Muslims and people with our background. So for politicians, when they go there and they have these big corporations in front of them that are telling, hey, we want you to pass this bill is important to us, and then they have people like us that don't give them any money and don't vote for them, and we're basically surviving, and we're asking them for things, then who are they going to listen to? So the system is designed in a way to serve the interests of the rich and the powerful. So we have to start with that premise, that you know what you're up against. But they still have some sort of constitutional obligation to represent their people. How do we counter these rich billionaires? You have to use people power. You have to gather, thousands of people, to assemble them, to mobilize them, to raise awareness. And when the people power starts becoming, it can keep a check on the people with the money. So if we want to change things in the culture and some of these laws, we have to convince more and more Americans that this issue is something that's important to them. And like I said last night, most Americans didn't care about gun violence until white people started getting killed, right? Those guns were, these, when they talk about the Second Amendment, that was mainly designed so white people can have guns and keep the black people out. When they talk about my Second Amendment right, is so they can have guns so they keep the, people of color away, protected from them. It's not just about taking on the government. So we live in a society that has a history of racism, of white supremacy. Regardless of the different laws that have come in the past, the laws are still designed in a way to keep the people in power in power. Now, how does that affect many of us that are caught up in this, in the national security cases, with, for example, these terrorism cases? And just to give you some background, because, as you know, many of these cases are not real cases. These are not real terrorists. These are just people that were vulnerable, they were misguided, they made some mistakes, they got involved with the wrong individuals, they trusted the wrong people, they were looking for a sense of belonging, they had trouble past themselves, they had problems maybe in their families, or whatever the reason may be, different circumstances. Maybe they were children of immigrants and they didn't like to see what was happening in Iraq or Somalia, or how our US government is killing people wholesale overseas, and they wanted to do something about it. Unfortunately, the people that guided them of what to do about it guided them the wrong way, and most of the time it's a paid informant that's guiding them to something specific so they can go out and arrest them, so they can say, oh, we caught a terrorist, because they couldn't find real terrorists. So when you don't find real terrorists, you make terrorists. And they're spending millions of dollars radicalizing our young people into fake plots. They're sending in people with long beards pretending to be imams, misguiding them, and using these paid informants. Now, are they doing that to the Jewish community? Are they doing that to other communities? Why are they doing it to the Jewish community? It doesn't mean that they don't have their crazies and their problems and their extremists. They have extremists. But they're not targeting them because the Jewish community would not allow it. Because the Jewish community would go to their senators and say, wait a minute, you have a program in your FBI that's targeting our Jewish community members, and this is unacceptable. And if you continue to do that, we're going to make sure you're out of office. However, we don't have a similar, Muslim community or Arab community that's willing to do the same thing or has that influence. Because most Arabs and Muslims have thought, okay, many of them think that the political system is corrupt, why even get involved? These are corrupt people, we cannot even compete. They're already bought off anyway. and they kind of just left it to other people to deal with. And if you notice, one of the things is many of the people that are being charged with terrorism or caught up in this stuff, especially with the charity cases, are Palestinians or people who advocate for Palestine. So unfortunately, and I don't want to generalize, in our government, especially in our executive branch, there are some elements within our government that have a bias against Muslims, or they have a pro-Israel, pro-Zionist agenda. Again, I don't want to generalize, but there are certain individuals, certain prosecutors that have this agenda, or they already have this ideology, and they join the government, and now they're bringing their ideology and their bias against a group they think is a threat. So now they're using the power of the government to eliminate individuals that they think, not necessarily a threat to the United States, but a threat to the existence of Israel. And not necessarily a threat in the means of violence, but it could be a threat in the means of support in Washington or America for Israel, because to them, some of these people think that both are equally as dangerous. Nonviolent and violence. In fact, some of them even will say that the nonviolent, peaceful resistance against Israel, whether in the form of government lobbying or in the form of anti-violent movements like the BDS movement, is a bigger threat than violent movements. Because violent movements, it's easy to try to question and say, you know what, these are violent people, let's use violence against them. But it's hard to it's hard to shut people up when they're using nonviolent means. When they're saying, we're going to boycott Israel or Israeli products because they are practicing they're violating human rights. And in fact, now in the United States, as we heard, maybe it was brought up earlier, they're now introducing legislation that tries to punish anyone who tries to boycott Israeli products. They passed it in many places. Now, the right to boycott is available to everybody in the United States. In fact, boycotting was a way to bring down the apartheid in where? South Africa. America was one of the last nations to join the boycotts or to even allow it. And for the longest time, the administration here was against boycotting and was providing cover to the racist, white supremacist apartheid regime in South Africa. Nelson Mandela himself was considered to be a terrorist on the terrorist watch list. Later on, he was celebrated as a hero. So back then, there were things like boycotting Coca-Cola for continuing to business in South Africa was a problem for the administration. So they're trying. Some of the people in the Palestinian activists said, let's use the South Africa model to have our own boycott program. And the civil society in Palestine called on the rest of the world to boycott Israeli products and Israeli academics and culture and other things. And some people have responded, and this is really hurting the state of Israel. So the pro-Israel lobby in America is now introducing legislation, and it has passed in several states, that punishes companies that choose to boycott Israeli products, which is something that should be protected by our First Amendment right. Okay? So you have individuals like that in the government that have this agenda, are pushing it. Unfortunately, we don't have enough Arabs and Muslims also in the government that are pushing a counter-narrative. So they have an open field to say whatever they want. In North Virginia, for example, you have this person named Kromberg. He's a prosecutor who, whenever he even submits, he's written things, opinions about his bias against Islam and Muslims. And he said things like he's not going to allow the Islamization of American courts. What he means by that is he's not even going to allow Muslims to say that I want things like religious accommodation. But he wouldn't say the same thing, I'm going to not allow the Jewishization, I guess, of our court system. So you have these people that are pushing these things, but we don't have, for example, Muslim police officers, or Muslim FBI agents, or Muslim prosecutors that are pushing a counter-narrative and say, wait a minute, you guys are going too far. This violates the Constitution. Even if you have a special relationship with Israel, the United States Constitution trumps all of that. So you have these bad elements in there. But how do we keep these elements? We have to go back to the oversight, because the people that oversee the FBI is Congress, and it's the senators. But since 9/11, and even before that, there's all this justice, talk about justice and human rights and the different constitutional rights, but they have a Muslim and Arab and South Asian exception. It's called national security. And when it comes to national security, they're willing to bend the rules. And judges are willing to overlook that, just like we saw in the Holy Land case in Texas, where they allowed people to testify for the first time behind a curtain. Something that violates our Constitution. How do you go in court? One of the basic rights is that you have to face your accuser and see the evidence against you in court. And here you have an Israeli intelligence person, you know, like their Mossad or people that work in their intelligence units, behind a curtain, using a fake name to protect their identity, and they're coming to American courts, violating our Constitution and testifying. Well, how do we even know what this person is saying is legit? And this was allowed in our courts. There was not enough uproar over that. Why? Because the people that would cause the uproar are the members of Congress that you'll go speak to. And if they don't care about the issue, then the FBI and these different prosecutors can do whatever they want. The attorney generals can do whatever they want because there's not enough pressure on top of them. That has to change, and it has to change by us visiting these lawmakers, and it can't just be us. We have to bring other people on board. So that way it's not just seen as a Muslim problem. When we go there, this is not a Muslim. We're talking about as Americans. We're demanding our American rights, our constitutional rights. And they have to also see that, okay, if we don't give what these people want, there's going to be a price to pay on election day. But if they see that we don't vote, we're not participating, we're not even registered to vote, we're not raising money for them, then they're not going to care. Well, this person can't hurt me anyway, because the only thing that I'm not going to say the only thing, but the main thing that they want to do is get reelected to their position or move up to another position higher. But if we can show that we can do some of this stuff and help them either elect them or get them out of office, then they'll respect us. Right now, they don't respect us. They can do whatever they want to us. And unfortunately, because the Muslim community themselves has not gotten serious about their own issues. The Muslim community itself sees this national security thing as a bias, but they don't want to get involved. And honestly, how many of you were involved in this fight before your own family members got arrested? Yeah, raise your hand, maybe one or two. But most of you were not involved in it because you didn't even know it existed. You always thought it was going to happen to someone else. You didn't even know it was happening. Because of all these gag orders and all the SAMs and all these acronyms that are designed to put a gag on everybody. They get it put away, they sign a plea deal, they can never talk about it so nobody ever knows, and shames the government for doing what they're doing. The inhumane, treatment. Our refuge are two places. The legal system, the judicial system, and Congress. And it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be based on 1 or 2 visits. You have to have a groundswell. You have to have a campaign. Right now, for example, have you guys heard of Shaun King? If you guys don't follow Shaun King on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, follow him. Shaun King, he's an African-American civil rights advocate and writer, and he writes a lot about police brutality, especially with the police shootings and mistreatment of African-Americans. He's involved with the Black Lives Matter movement. And now he has something called the Justice PAC. Because he said, he basically saw that one of the problems is these prosecutors, police officers were shooting and killing innocent black men, that the police were not getting charged with a crime. And you're like, what's going on? Or when they charge them with a crime, they charge them with a lesser crime so then they get off it anyway and they're not charging them with the real crime. Yet when a person of color is charged, they throw everything at them. Even things they didn't do, hoping something sticks. So having the right justice system is making sure that the right prosecution or the right charges are filed to begin with. So when you have indictments that have like 50 different accusations, some of them don't even apply, well, eventually a jury is going to pick one of them. You know what I mean? So he started this, and now they're replacing these prosecutors, attorneys, attorney generals and prosecutors across the country on the state level that they see are biased. And they're having success. They're electing people in there to replace them that are more fair. Now that does not apply in the federal system, because the federal system, they're appointed by the president. but they're also nominated and somehow approved by the Senate. So by having political power in this country, then that will translate into less of these prosecutions. I was one of the founders of CARE in Florida. I worked in civil rights for a number of years, and I saw that our role as civil rights was playing firefighter. We're going out there and trying to play, firefighters, putting out fires as much as we can. Many of your cases we couldn't even handle. They're just, criminal, and we didn't have the resources to deal with them. But one of the things that I basically discovered was a lot of the discrimination was happening because we lacked political power in America. That one of the deterrents to the discrimination we're facing is having political empowerment and political influence, because people don't mess with people that have power. People go after people that don't have power. And right now they're scapegoating our community left and right. So a big agenda part of CCF should be to empower our community and make this issue beyond just the families, that this is an issue that is an American issue. We attach ourselves, we go to these justice conferences that apply to other people, people of color. We go to the Hispanic community, we go to the African American community, we go to the Congressional Black Caucus, and we make sure that we demand that they adopt our issue and agenda of these national security cases that are violating the Constitution. And then we also tell them that they have to adopt things to change some of the inhumane treatment of people that are already in the prison. And that's some of the things that we'll be lobbying about on Monday. So for example, this bill that was introduced to the Grace Act, for example, which is calling for more compassion in federal prisons by the BOP. And I think tomorrow you're going to get more details about these bills, so you don't have to read them now. But in our presentation, we're going to talk more about how to maybe do some role play. But I was wanting to show you how these members of Congress are spending their day, because in reality the system is designed that they themselves are enslaved to this money. Because if you take so much money, millions of dollars from one person, these rich billionaires are not just giving you millions of dollars for the sake of giving it to you. It's not charity to them. They want something in return. They want you to sell more of their weapons. They want to get certain contracts. They want to loosen, banking regulations so they could rip off the American public. They want less oversight. They want to raise credit card fees. They want to do so many things that benefits them. They want to get more, tax cuts or whatever it may be. So in order to win, they have to do that. And in order to also do that, they have to raise money. Now, I wanted to show you what the schedule of a typical member of Congress is. In an 8-hour day, this is how they spend their day. They do 4 hours of call time, 1 to 2 hours of constituent visits, 2 hours on the committee floor, 1 hour strategic outreach, 1 hour recharge time. Their schedule is very tight. And some of you may be thinking what call time is. What do you think call time is? It's someone other than this person in the back. What is call time?
Definition or like time?
What do you think they do during this time? This call time for 4 hours. It's the bulk of their work.
What, they get phone calls? Do they actually answer them, or are they like?
No, this is not. This is not receiving phone calls.
Doing nothing?
Huh?
Doing nothing?
No, it's not doing nothing. Call time are phone calls they make to donors. To donors. They spend 4 hours of every day calling their donors. Now, because there are certain rules, they cannot raise money while they are inside their government office. So these senators and members of Congress go across the street to offices rented by the party, where they go and it's just basically like a phone booth, like a closet. It's almost like jail. It's actually much smaller than the cell that the inmates get. And they go in this room and they're just basically dialing, calling their donors to raise money from them. 4 hours every day. It's not a fun job. Why? Because if they don't raise that money, they're not going to have enough money in their campaign accounts to be able to run for office again. 1 to 2 hours are the constituent visits. That's when you go visit them. Most of the time you're not actually seeing them, you're seeing their staff. But for the very big donors, they get to see them. 1 to 2 hours a day for constituent visits, people that actually come and visit their offices. 2 hours on the committee or floor. All these members and senators are part of committees. Like, for example, you saw the Brett Kavanaugh, situation. You had all these people on a committee. They're part of the Judicial Committee or whatever committees they have. They have Foreign Relations Committee. All of them are assigned to different committees. They have to go and sit in these committees and participate in hearings. So every day they spend about 1 to 2 hours or 2 hours on the committee or the floor when they actually go and vote on legislation. 1 hour strategic outreach, just going to like a meet and greet or a breakfast or something with the press. And then 1 hour recharge, just like lunch or break. And they do this every day, day in and day out. So when you decide, because they're spending the most amount of time on the priority to them. So their priority is to do what? Raise money. And they're under the gun. They have these finance directors that are basically, their full-time job is to make sure that they're sitting on the phone, making calls. Many of them quit because they hate doing this. It's not this glamorous position when they're walking around just taking pictures and stuff. They're out there, have to raise so much money. And then this is their schedule when they're in DC. Their schedule when they are in the district is something similar. They spend a little bit less time on fundraising and call time, 2 hours proactive. That's when I say in the district, that means when they go back to their city or state where they come from. 1 to 2 hours reactive community events and 1 hour strategic. So they're spending so much of their time, not much time on policy. Who's handling the policy in their office? Who is handling, that's the question, who's handling these policies and laws in their office? Their aides, their assistants. They have a legislative director, they have legislative assistant. They have 20-something-year-old young people that are doing this work. They're doing the research, they're drafting the bills, and many times, some of these bills that they're handed to them, especially the ones that are in favor of the corporations and the billionaires, are actually drafted by the organizations, the corporations themselves. Hey, we give you so much money. It's not like bribery, but it almost is kind of like bribery. We gave you money. Remember us? We helped you win. Now it's time to work for us. We want you to pass this. Oh, I don't know. I have some issues about that. Well, re-election is coming around. Now, how often is Congress re-elected? The representatives, every what? 2 years. President is every 4. House of Representatives every 2 years. That means as soon as they win, they're back running again. The senators are a little bit different. They're every how long? 6 years. So the members in the House, the representatives, are always running. They're always in need of raising money. And there's how many members in the House? How many members of House of Representatives are there in the country? 435. How many senators? 100. There are 2 senators for every state, regardless of the size of the state. Meaning that California, that has 55 million people, is the same as North Dakota, that has 1 million. They both have the same amount of senators. When it comes to the Senate, all the states are equal. When it comes to the House, they're not all equal. It's based on the size. So, when you have all these members of Congress, they have parties. They have the Democrats and the Republicans, and they have their leadership. Most of these party people are rubber stamp people, meaning that they will do what the leadership says. And on both sides, they have probably about a total of 8 people that are in the leadership. Who's the leader of the Democrats in the House? Nancy Pelosi. Who's the leader of the Republicans? The Speaker of the House? Paul Ryan. What Paul Ryan says, the rest usually do. Paul Ryan has his majority whip and deputy majority whip. You know what a whip is? You know the whip on a horse, So their title is actually a whip. This is a herd of sheep, and they have to whip them to make sure they get what they want. And what does Paul Ryan say? Paul Ryan says, this is my agenda, and if you guys don't do it, you're not going to get the political appointments that I'm going to assign you, in the next term. You have to be in my good graces. Nancy Pelosi says the same thing. So in the end, these members of Congress are not so independent. One, they're indebted to the corporations and the rich billionaires, and at the same time, they have to toe the line according to their party. So even if they themselves feel a certain way about an issue, they have to feel so strongly about it, or show that they have so much anger or so much support or opposition within their district themselves that it could cost them the election, that they would have to ever think to go against the leadership or to go against a huge donor. So understanding all these things, that's the position that they're in. They're not so independent. So when we're going to talk to them, we have to be able to have that type of background and understand that they may not necessarily be able to do what they want right away, and the way that we approach them has to be somewhat strategic, calculated. And when we're going to talk to them, there's 435 members, we have to know which committee is responsible for the issue that impacts our issue. It doesn't make sense to go to the Veterans Affairs people committee and talk to them about, you know, I don't know, the policy with Saudi Arabia or Israel. That's not their issue. You got to know who it is. And then not only who it is, but who's the chair of that committee, because the chair and the minority leader in that committee are the most two powerful people. You have to convince them if you want to get something passed or supported. So we have to be, we can't reach out to all 435. We would have to focus our effort on a specific committee, then know, and then when we're there, we have to also make sure that we can't just go in there and start yelling at them. So there's a certain protocol in how we approach these individuals. We can, and don't expect things to change from the first meeting. Now, first-person stories are really impactful, and making sure they know that you're in their district. And talking to them as an American. You know, some of us, especially the ones that are born overseas or children of immigrants, sometimes talk about America as, or Americans as something else. And I'm wrapping up here. So talk as a first-person American. You know, maybe you're Somali, but you're an American now, even if you have an accent, don't have an accent. And your country failed you and your family, and they targeted you and targeted your family, and this is unconstitutional. This is not what Americans stand. This is not what my country stands for. You don't talk to them as, oh, this is not what you white people are supposed to be doing, and I'm some sort of foreigner. No, I'm a taxpayer, I'm a voter, and you know, you approach them from that kind of position. But before we even know how to approach them, understand what they care about the most. And I'm not saying that money and votes are the only thing they care about, but that's a huge priority, because without that, they can't keep going back to Congress and doing what they want to do. And with that said, we're going to do some role playing at the end. I'm going to pass the mic to the next speaker. Thank you so much.
I want you to know that Lynne Jackson is one of my favorite people. She's gotten me into so much trouble you can't believe it. But among her various attributes, she picked out a piece of wasteland that was considered of no use whatsoever outside of Albany, and decided that this was an ecological gem that no one else had ever noticed. And she sued the city of Albany once a year for 30 years. At least 30 lawsuits. Some of them went all the way to the Court of Appeals, and she did it without any money, using only lasagna dinners to do it. And in the end, she won. That whole area has now been preserved. It is truly an ecological gem. It has great funding from the federal government to save endangered species. So she knows a lot about how you get things done.
You're very kind, Steve. Thank you so much. But
No idea how much trouble you got me into.
oh, good. No, hi, I'm Lynne Jackson, and I just want to say one thing about what Steve just said, and that is that I met Steve because he did a pro bono lawsuit for the environmental group I worked with, and he would come back and he would come to my office and I would print all the legal papers, and he started telling me stories about a man in prison named Yassin Aref, and eventually that is how I got involved with these cases. And I asked him at one point after Yassin was convicted, I said, do you think I should write to him? And Steve said to me, it will be an adventure. So I thank Steve. Yeah, we're still on it. I thank Steve very much for that. Okay, I'm going to talk about, I think what Ahmed said is absolutely fabulous. You should listen to every word he said, because he knows what he's talking about. So in terms of voting, I just want to ask a few questions. How many here are eligible to vote here in the United States? Raise your hands. So almost everyone here. Okay. How many people are registered to vote? So everybody, is anybody, I think it's, am I correct in that everyone who's eligible to vote is registered to vote? Pretty much? Okay. How many people voted in 2016? This is good. This is good. 2017? Maybe fewer people, right? Well, yeah, the local campaigns happen in the off years. Well, they're not really off years. Every year you get to vote. And the more you vote, the better it is. This is good. This is very good. The thing is that what you need to know is that the fact that you are registered to vote is public information, right? Does everyone know that? That if you are registered to vote, it is public information. It is also public information if you went and voted at a particular election. So the politicians, and believe me, they look at this stuff in great detail. They know your name, your address, how old you were, and when the last time you voted was, and what party you're enrolled in. And all the politicians look at this. Now, they don't know how you vote. That's the beauty of the secret ballot here in the United States, our Constitution, secret ballot. But they know that you vote. And the fact that so many people are registered and do vote here is very important. You should vote in every single election, whether it's for the school board or the school budget or the city or the town that you live in. You should vote for every single election. Since I turned 18, well, I was the first wave of 18-year-olds who could vote in the country. Since I first turned 18, I missed 2 school board votes. I'm so embarrassed. So the thing is, everyone needs to vote. Now, why do I talk about this? It's because the power is that the politicians know if you vote. Like, if you vote often, you will get massive numbers of robocalls just before the election, right? So you must be doing something right because you're getting these robocalls. So I come from Albany, New York. Albany, New York had for a long time one of the largest democratic political machines in the country. Oldest, not largest, oldest. In terms of length of the machine, it rivaled Chicago in terms of, so just to give you an example, we've had 3 mayors in 72 years. That's how the political machine in Albany is. So in Albany, if you don't enroll in the Democratic Party, you really have no voice. Because if you enroll in the Democratic Party in Albany, you get to vote for the Democrat. And the Democrat always wins, or almost always wins. And so you have to be enrolled in a party. Now, is everyone here enrolled in a party? Nope. So my suggestion is enroll in a party, whether you believe them or not, because you get to vote twice. You get to vote for who's going to be the party candidate, and then you get to vote in the general election. So you got to vote twice, because the people, like the whole issue, remember with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, you know, it really, the only people in New York State, the laws differ with different states, but in New York State, if you were not enrolled in the Democratic Party a year ahead of time, you would not be able to vote in the Democratic Party. And you wouldn't have been able to vote for Bernie. And I knew many people who were like, I want to vote for Bernie, I want to vote for Bernie. And it's like, they didn't register a year ahead of time in the Democratic Party. They couldn't vote in the primary. So it's very important. And even if you don't agree with the platforms, though I think party does matter. I think party matters a lot, because I think it makes a lot of difference. But because as Ahmed just explained, you know, the party who's in power is the one who gets to make the legislation. And that's really important to know. So party does matter. So what you do is you enroll in a party, and then you get to vote in the primary, and you get to vote in the general election. So the other thing is, at your local mosque, I hope you go out and enroll everybody and register people to vote. And in New York, of course, the last day to register was last week, so can't do it for this year. But for next year, you should go and have either the Leave and voters come in or do it yourself to have people register at the mosque. In years past, I've done this, gone to the mosque, I made a tablecloth that says voter registration, and we go and we hang out at the mosque and register people to vote after Jumu'ah prayer. Because what we need to do to address this issue, as Ahmed explained, is we need to change the political narrative. So this past week, like Steve mentioned, that lasagna dinners is what drove our litigation for 30 years with my little group. Well, we still meet every month and have a lasagna dinner. And this dinner, this one we had on Wednesday, we had a local man speak. I've probably known him for 40 years. And he is running as a Green for the New York State Comptroller's position. And at the dinner, he said to me, now, Lynn, he said to the people at the dinner, he says, look, I know I'm not going to win. I mean, a Green Party candidate is not going to win state office at this time. He said, but he's doing it. He's running because he wants to raise issues. And so I feel like he wants to change the political narrative. So what he's doing is running, and then when he gets in a debate with the current incumbent comptroller, he gets to raise the issues that he wants. And I think that's part of what we need to do, is to change the political narrative. So usually I say go out and vote, but now I say don't just go out and vote, go run for office. Because we need to go out there. When Ahmed says there are a lot of, that the FBI doesn't go into Jewish temples, they don't go to Episcopalian churches looking for targets of their terrorism campaign, they come to mosques, which I think is totally wrong. It's completely anti-American. But that's because they're more represented. But if I'm correct, I believe the percentage of Muslims in this country is about the same as percentage of Jews. Right? I think that I'm correct in that, which means, there are many minorities in this country, and I think that Muslims also need to go and meet their representatives and participate in the local political, the local politics. Where do the congressmen ultimately come from? They come from your local communities. And so to me, it's really important to change the narrative, not only nationally, but to start on a local level, to change that narrative, to change the political narrative, to show that Muslims have been targeted by the FBI, and it's time, to stop this, and that we need to change the political narrative and look more for justice. So before I continue, I just want to know, how many people here know the names of their 2 state senators? A couple people, okay. How many know who your congressman's name is? Okay, all right. How many know who your mayor or town supervisor is? A little more, okay. Because it's really important to get involved in the political process to know who these people are. So it's not hard to find out. You just go Google U.S. Senate, you put in your state, and it will tell you who your senators are. So our senator, we have 2 senators, Senator Chuck Schumer, who you've probably heard of from New York, and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Kirsten Gillibrand is like a local, she came from the Albany area. So our state senator, our senator in the federal government came from the local area. So you never know what might happen with your local people, that they may progress up have a bigger office. So it's really important to know them. It's also important to talk to them so that local people understand your issues. If you have, depending on the local government, but you need to understand the local government, and you need to meet these people. I have been known, okay, confessions here, I have been known to find politicians in public because politicians want to come out and meet people. And for a while, my local congressman knew as soon as he saw me that I was going to talk about the FBI targeting Muslims. And he knew that. And he knew that was the only thing I was going to talk to him about. And it's important to catch people in public and ask them questions, because oftentimes congresspeople will go places and you can meet them in public, and you should bring up your issues so that they know they have constituents who have concerns about what's happening to people's family members. Very important. So the local thing, I'm not going to talk for that much longer, but so in Albany in 2010, At that time, so I live in downtown Albany. My local common council member, that would be a city, they call it the Common Council of Albany. It's like the city council. Albany is divided up into 15 wards. And my council member, my alderman, was a man named Dominic Castellero. And he was very progressive. I think he's one of the best politicians I've ever met in my whole life. A wonderful man. So I went to him and asked him, I said, we need to pass a resolution about the issue of targeting Muslims. And the reason you pass resolutions, now resolutions, unlike an ordinance, a resolution has no power of law. You can't enforce it. It's not enforceable. But the reason you try to get resolutions passed on a local level is so that people will talk about the issue. And what we did is we organized, and the day that that resolution was going to be introduced and voted on, we had something like 200 people come to the Albany City Council meeting. We had like 200 people, and Fatan Shnur came, and we had people who came very far from Cherry Hill, New Jersey to Albany, New York. It's a long ways. And we had other people come who are here, and people told their stories at the Albany Common Council. Some of the people who spoke were very young, 11-year-old girls, some of them, and I think Abu Herrera might have spoken. I can't remember, or one of your family members did, at any rate. And in the end, there was not a dry eye in the House, and everybody knew about the issue. And after the meeting, the city council president, and she and I did not see eye to eye politically, but she said to me, Lynn, you know I've been involved in politics a long time. I have had parents come to advocate for their children at the city council, but I've never had children come and ask me to help get their daddies back. And it really made an impression. So that's why you not only need to vote, run for office, but you need to talk to your local politicians because they want to be reelected. So hopefully they'll talk to you. So, and if anyone wants a copy of the resolution, I can pass it around. It's a little old, but it's certainly quite relevant. Thank you so much.
I'm going to... Yeah, there we go. I'm going to jump in right now because I want to leave enough time to do some role playing after this is over. And I just have a rather short, first of all, I want to tell you a story and then kind of go through the wisdom that I learned from this story. About 5 years ago, a group of us got together, and it included people who had been wrongfully convicted, had gone to jail for 20, 25 years for a murder that they had not committed. And they could later prove that they had not committed it by blood evidence. And they were exonerated, and they were in many cases given a very large amount of money by the state. And they were still really upset by the way they had been treated. And together we decided to come up with some kind of a remedy that we could get, and we decided that the best thing to do would be a way to get rid of bad prosecutors. I was formerly with a commission on judicial conduct that got rid of bad judges. I spent most of my professional career there. So we said, well, maybe we should create a commission on prosecutorial conduct to get rid of bad prosecutors. Now, everybody we talked to about this bill said, wow, this is a really great bill. We love this bill. But then we talked to the professionals, and they said, they laughed. They just laughed out loud. They said, there's no way you could ever pass a bill like that. Not a single state in the nation has a bill like that, has a commission like that. And the reason is because the district attorneys are the most powerful people in the system. And you are going up, you don't have any money. You don't have any influence. You are a bunch of convicts that have gotten exonerated. You don't have any credence out there. How are you thinking you're going to get a bill passed against the power of the district attorneys? Well, fortunately, we had one asset that I don't think any of us realized how important it was. It was a guy who had been at least wrongfully charged and then escaped, got out of it. But he had previously worked for the legislature. He actually knew how the legislature worked. None of the rest of us did. We were all completely clueless. So he said, all right, I'm going to just plug ahead forward. And he pushed ahead, and 5 years later, about a couple of months ago, we talked to the professionals again, the professional lobbyists that you hired to go down there to get your bill through. And they laughed at us again, and they said, are you still at that? That's such a waste of time. That will never pass. It will never pass. I guarantee you it'll never pass. And 2 hours later, it passed, overwhelmingly, and was signed into law by the governor. So what I want to talk to you about is the wisdom that I learned from this brilliant man, Bill Bastick, who figured out how the legislature works and how a completely powerless group with no money could get a bill like that passed, notwithstanding the power of the district attorney. So I passed out this wisdom. It's 4 pages, and you can have it right there. And it starts, I can skip through it really quickly, I think. The first step you got to do is to tell your own story. And you've been through that endlessly this morning. Really, really important. What we had, a huge advantage, was we had exonerees, people that had spent 20 years in jail for a murder they had not committed. And nobody can sit there and listen to them and not be moved. As I would say, nobody can sit there and listen to you and not be moved. Do not underestimate the power that you have. But the very fact that you can move people by your story is not going to get very far typically, because the problem is that the only thing a legislator can do is pass legislation. And you need to put this into some kind of legislation that will not only solve your problem, but solve a general problem. It becomes a bill for a particular class of people. So that's step 2 on the first page there. I have some thoughts about it, but generally it is more complicated. You need to get a lawyer involved to get the wording right, and you need to have other people put input into it. In my case, because I was the former chief attorney of the Commission on Judicial Conduct, and we wanted to make the new commission as close as possible to the Judicial Commission, I just took the old bill that we had for the Judicial Commission. Everywhere it says judge, I put prosecutor in. So it was really simple. I got a very quick bill out of it. So there you got that. Now the question is, how do you get your bill passed? And now we're going to start at the bottom of page 1, and it says, a movement to get your bill passed. And the wisdom that Bill Bastick brought to this, and then the wisdom I want to talk to you about it here, have you all got to the, we're on page 2 now, flipping this thing over. The wisdom that he came up with was that when faced with a objection from the district attorney and an overpowering bill that made common sense and should get passed, what is a legislator likely to do? And he recognized that a legislator is not likely to pass or vote for a bill simply because it's good legislation. They will vote for it because they think their constituents want it. And so it is really important to create the movement that will get legislation passed. So what I'm running down from here is a number of ways in which you can do this. One of the first things to do is to concentrate on who you have to influence. As Ahmed was saying, you don't have to get every member of Congress, every member of your state legislature to do it. You need certain people. You certainly need the leaders on board. So you figure out where their home district is. Where are they from? God forbid there's some faraway place, but those are districts that you're going to have to work with. And concentrate on the committee heads. You've got to get your bill through the committee. The committee heads of the committees can do that. So if you get the leaders, the heads of the committees, and the people that are sympathetic to you, you have a certain momentum in the legislature to get this bill moving. So what you want to do is to create the impression, and actually that's a relatively small number of people to influence. So you target, where are these offices? Now, all of the legislators, all of your congressional people, have home offices. So you don't have to run down to Washington. There's always a temptation to say, you know, I'm going to hire a high-priced lobbyist down here in Washington, and they can go up and lobby all the people here because they're all here at the same time. So simple, right? But it doesn't have the effect that you will have if you try to do this. So it's your story that's going to carry this, and you are trying to create the impression that in your district, where you live, everybody wants this bill. And if you do that, you might influence the 20 key people that you need to get your bill moving. So that's how you begin. Of course, you're going to want to then not only come up and introduce yourself to the staff in Washington, but find out where the home office is back in your state and go down there and introduce yourself to the folks in the home office. That's very convenient. Now, how do you create the impression that there is a big movement for this in your state? Well, actually, not that many people go down and talk to their congressional representative. It doesn't happen that often. So let's say you got a solidarity group of 6 people. People in your home state who agree with where you're going with this. And let's say each one of them went down separately to the office and said, wow, I'm really interested in this issue. Can you do something with it? That's 6 people talking to the home office saying, do something about this. That's actually a big response. That's more than a lot of offices get. So the staff is going, wow, what is it with this issue? We're getting a lot of pushback on this. So that's your first step. Let's see. The next thing to do is to get the solidarity group to start writing letters. Comes from different people, but write letters to your congressional representative. Have them write letters to the editor. One of the things that typically the letters to the editor in local papers are really big because all the people, the congresspeople, follow that. They want to know what is being talked about in their district. And typically the newspapers will require that they stay about under 150 words, letters to the editor. How difficult is it to write a letter of 150 words and send it to your congressman? It's not hard at all, right? Everybody should be doing that. Now, go down to number 11 here. One of the most important things you can do is to get editorials in the newspaper. Very often, if you go down and you can convince the newspaper editors that there's a problem, and you've got a bill, and that they need to get behind that bill, you will get an editorial out of that. And that's dynamite. That really works well because those are always shown to the congressional representatives, and that represents a voice of a certain segment of the people. So that will get paid attention to. Then we go over to number 12 here. Bill did this very well. He was really clever. He would figure out on these just on the targeted people that we're going after, where they were going to meet. That you can call up their office and find out what their schedule is. And so somebody's going to cut a ribbon at opening a Walmart somewhere or something. So you send somebody down and in the crowd, and they raise their hand and say, oh, I got a question. What about this bill? How do we get this bill passed? And all of a sudden, it's like, what is this with this bill? Everywhere I go, I'm hearing about this bill. It's constantly in my face. Find out, as Ahmed said, they all need money, and they all have donors. Find out who the donors are. Are they labor leaders? Are they corporations? Are they religious groups? Go and try to talk to some of those people that you know your representative depends on. See if you could get a letter of endorsement from them supporting your bill. That's dynamite. All of a sudden the representative is going, oh, good grief, now I've got my very funding is being threatened. And we were really surprised, like for our Commission on Prosecutorial Conduct, one of the first and most enthusiastic supporters who gave us a letter of endorsement was the teachers union. We said, teachers union, why would they care about the issue? Well, they do care about it because their teachers are in very vulnerable positions. They can get prosecuted very easily based on allegations of which, as we know from Kavanaugh, there is no corroboration. And they want to make sure that the prosecutors are playing it fair. So they piled in behind us. Now, a lot of this is a labor issue, and once you see labor getting behind a particular issue, all of the candidates get kind of like, because you don't want labor against you. So this was a big winner for us. One of the things that was very important was that the DAs began to push back, and they raised objections to our bill. And so we wrote reports showing how wrong they were. As it turned out, they kept saying there's no misconduct. We don't have a problem. Nobody's getting removed in New York because we're doing bad things. So every time a case was reversed because of prosecutorial misconduct, we would send the opinion reversing that, we would send it up to the legislators. We created a newsletter so that every Wednesday they would get on their desk a little newsletter over the mail, over the emails, which is very easy to send out, listing all the cases that got reversed for prosecutorial misconduct, and we began to indicate how much it costs to retry a case, how many millions of dollars they're wasting by prosecutorial misconduct. Even the Republicans are paying attention at this point. Wow, that's a lot of money. And so on. You can sort of see down, as I list down these various issues, social media, really important. You can start a buzz going about that. Doing presentations to civic groups, that's number 18. 19, getting government, local governments to pass resolutions supporting your cause. And so on. Then connect with other groups that are supporting your issues. Number 20, which we've talked about. 21 is perhaps the most single important thing that you can do. How many here belong to a mosque? Wow, not many. I'm a little surprised at that. Well, if you, what? No?
That's after.
I mean, how many of you go to a mosque?
We go to pray like not.
No, that's what he means. How many
Yeah.
attend masjid?
How many attend the masjid?
Well, it's
All right. So, how difficult would it be to start a registration drive in the masjid? I know a lot of masjids do it already. That's quite easy, but there's a point to this. I'll give you two examples. You tell me which sounds like you're going to be more effective. In one case, you go up to a representative and you say, this is a really good bill, would you please vote for it? I believe very strongly in it. The other example, you ask a representative to come to your mosque to talk about the issue. And you quietly mention to the representative, oh, and by the way, there's 1,000 people in the masjid and every one of them is registered to vote and every one of them votes. Just by the way, it's completely coincidental, has nothing to do with your appearance here. Which do you think, which attempt is going to get more interest by the representative? Right? The second one, because that person is speaking for 1,000 people. Right? So that's why it's so important. It doesn't matter if you're registered in the Muslim community. It doesn't matter who they vote for. Nobody knows who they vote for. What matters is that you vote. And because you vote, they have to pay attention to your issue. Okay? And I think all three of us are saying that because there's nothing more important than that. Without that, you can't get off the ground. So at the very end, I'm going to just finish with this. How simple is this? If we had a bunch of little groups around in different congressional districts, and we could get them to do just the simple things that I've suggested to try to get our legislation passed, could we do that? We're that kind of an organization because our great weakness is we're spread out all over the country. Let's turn that into our great strength. Could you find one other impacted person and have that person write up their story and tell your congressional representative? How many people think they could do that? Find one other person who's been impacted by racism, by Islamophobia, and rate that story out. Okay, you could do that, right? How many people could, on just one occasion, visit the home office of the targeted congressional person to lobby for the legislation that you want? How many people could do that? Just on one occasion, home office. Come on, get the hands up here. You could do that just one time, right? 3, how many people could write one letter to the editor, 150 words? Hands up, let's see it. We could do that, right? That's 150 words. How hard is that? All right, 4. How many people could attend one event at which your congressional representative is there and raise your hand and say, could you tell me about Bill so-and-so? You could do that, right? All right. How many people could attend one meeting with an editor of a newspaper and say, look, you really got to get behind this bill? Right. Okay, that's not so hard. How many people could attempt to attain one endorsement from one important person that the congressman knows? How many could do that? No? I'm saying, so you're saying no? Try to obtain a letter of endorsement from some group that the congressperson relies on for help, for support. All right? I'll go on because I can see that's a tough. How many people could go out and say, I will personally take responsibility to make sure that 100% of my mosque votes? Come on, we could do that. I want to see some hands here. This is simple.
My mosque vote was.
Yeah, you 100%?
Yes.
All right, and you're going to make some calls and say, get down to the polls? All right. And then, how many people are willing to attend a victory celebration at the end of 5 years, in which awards are given to everybody who made the impossible happen? We got our bill passed, right? Okay. So, yeah, I'm running out of time here, but I want you to read through this at your thing and think about it. Because we could, as an organization, do something like that. It would involve all of you, and you'd have to be committed to make it work. But I think it's worth doing. Yeah, Hadaya.
Last August, there is 2 ladies win, the Muslim lady win the election, and our
Rashida
Rashida Khalid, and the other Muslim lady, I think in Minnesota or other. So can you tell us like how to, if that's gonna help if we like try to reach Rashida in Michigan, talk to her about this stuff? Or?
Well, wait a minute. This is in Michigan. This is your congressional representative? All right, well, just get down to our home office. You just Google it. Just Google it. You'll get you the home office. You can get in there.
She's saying the fact that she's Arab and Muslim,
Yeah.
will she be additional help?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think all of the Arab Americans who get to Congress are obviously going to be sympathetic to you, but they're in a tough position because they don't want to look like the go-to person that all the Muslims go to get legislation passed. They have to be a little bit more balanced about it. You will do them no favors by relying entirely on them. And certainly when we were trying to get our bill passed, the Democrats were not much help, actually. They would just say, why are you coming to us? You know we're probably going to vote for your bill. Go to the Republicans. Don't bother me with this. The Democrats are really not much help. But the truth of the matter is, if you do your homework, if you work hard to get something passed that you really want to do, by doing all the things I'm suggesting here, your congressional representative will jump behind this thing because you have provided her with the support of the community that she needs. You see what I'm saying? It's a two-way street. If you don't supply the support to the representative, they're out there on a limb, and they can get cut off very easily. And particularly the Muslim ones are in a vulnerable position, even though they're, I think, almost automatically sympathetic.